I found an obscure one in Japan. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. This is the Les Paul Vixen series today. This is probably the most boring finish out of the entire run. However, you just don't see the Vixens too often, so I wouldn't hold it against you if you've never actually ran into one of these. The Les Paul Vixen was a series that came out with the new Gibson 2006 models. We're talking about the Goddess series Les Pauls and SGs, the Vegas Standard, and the High Rollers, the new Century series, which have the doofy mirrored pickguards on them. But don't forget about the Studio Premium Plus tops or the LPDC Pro model. We've documented quite a few of the Goddesses on the show. Those were marketed towards women. They were slightly smaller Les Pauls, and they had these beautiful angelic colors. And those things are quite popular yet today. The Vixen was the slightly cheaper stripped down version of the Goddess, also marketed towards women. Side by side you might not even notice it, but this is shrunken by about a ½ inch. And then instead of having a maple top, it's a thinner body guitar similar to the Les Paul Special that was made at that point in time. These things with the humbuckers and basically just a stripped down Les Paul. It is kind of hard to visualize until you put it into a real Les Paul case, and then things become ever apparent of how much shrunken these are. So again, it's like a ½ inch each side and from your depths. So these do not fit in a regular Les Paul case perfectly. They slide up and down. In order to have a proper fitting case, you'd have to steal one from a Les Paul Goddess. However, what's still kind of cool about these is the fact that we still have the carved top, so it's not a flat top like many of those were, and it's straight up mahogany, so you could say, hey, that kind of reminds me of like a 54 Custom. But just like the Goddess, it features the exact same pickups, except for this time we don't get the fun colored windings, and it's still a wrap tail piece. These featured an open pore satin finish, whereas the Goddess had a regular satin finish on the back and a glossed top. So essentially the only cool unique factor to the Les Paul Vixen is the fact that we have these strange diamond inlays, but they did come in some pretty cool flavors, such as Caribbean Blue, Corona Yellow, Coral, which was a pink color, Ebony, and Red Metallic. Here's my current collection of them, and if you're looking for one to add to your set, the blue and pink show up quite a bit. This red metallic is really hard to find, and it gets a slightly nicer finish than all the rest. It's not an open pore finish, they filled it in a little bit more. But yeah, it's still satin, this one's just been glossed up a little bit. We have documented a pink one before, but that was before I kept a personal collection. There is actually a famous user of one of these, Katy Perry. It's actually in the I Kissed a Girl and I Liked It music video. And you can also see her playing one of the Caribbean Blues. Now, most likely Gibson sent those to her to specifically use, but apparently her pink one was stolen from her. How much is one of these going to run you? Generally between, $700 and $1,200. These are not highly desirable, super sought after. They're just kind of obscure pieces of Gibson history at this point in time anyway. So at the end of the day, if you like everything that the Goddess does, but you just need a cheaper version, that's when you pick up a Vixen. But they are not readily available. You're lucky if you see one of these things show up per year, regardless of color. But it actually looks like they polished the frets up and conditioned our fretboard, so at least that saves me a little bit of time in the cleaning department. And check out the wood grain on this one. I'm very happy with that, but a little bit sad about that ding on the top. But in the 7 years or so that I've been aware of the Vixens, this is the first ebony one I have ever seen show up. So let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. And we'll check those other colors out in reviews and documentations another day. Inside the Vixen, let's go ahead and check this out. So as I told you earlier, it's just the regular 490R, 498T pickups, just like the Goddess. The main difference being we have the full-on chrome covers, USA branding, on both of the pickups. But we've got the familiar 13.66 K ohms in the bridge, 7.78 in the neck, and 5 in the middle just for fun, which backs up that this is the original set. Here's what our neck pickup cavity looks like. It's all mahogany construction. You can even see the router drill holes that they used. But now let's talk about our tailpiece. It's just your standard wraparound style that does have the lightning bar to help with intonation a bit. The exact same thing you would find on the Goddess series and many other wrap tails. Nothing necessarily special. I'd always kind of thought the Ebony version was like the worst out of the Vixen, but now that I have it in person, it's honestly one of my favorites now because it almost has that dog hair-like finish to it. You can see the wood grain everywhere, and this one just happens to have really nice ringy run-out grain in the center and then a little bit more porous on the edges. I mainly just picked this one up for the set, but I'm really digging the vibes of this thing now. Slap it in like a hot pink case and I think it does exactly what it's trying to do. But I did make the executive decision to touch up some of the bare wood spots. Like, is it perfect? No, but I just used a official Gibson lacquer pen from this era. There was some wear along the edge too. It was nothing too crazy. I mean, these are very thin, fragile finishes. If you use them at all, you can tell that they buff up, and it only takes one micro ding to actually break through to the wood. I think I'm happy with my decision there. These do not have pickguard stock from the factory, and you saw this right, just a master volume, master tone. So once again, the whole point of the Goddess Vixen series was to offer a slightly smaller Les Paul that had simplified controls to make it as easy as possible. That is pretty much the marketing message here. If you're curious what the male version of these guitars is, it's the Les Paul GT. Came out at the exact same time. So normally a Les Paul is 9 inches this way. These are roughly 8.5. And instead of 13 down here, it's 12.5. The body thickness is going to change depending on where you take it, but this one's like 1.36-ish here, and then maybe 1.1 at the very slimmest with our comfort cut on the back. But now we can move on from our 3-piece mahogany body to our mahogany neck and rosewood fretboard. Now I do want to issue a slight correction here. There is one other guitar that's come out since the last time I reviewed the Vixen, and it's the limited edition Dave Mustaine Alien Tech Green. It's not exactly the same. They're a little bit more oblong and take up more of the fretboard. Outside of like some banjos that utilize a similar style inlay, which is probably where they borrowed these from. They're not mother of pearl or anything, regular acrylic stuff. Yeah, it's just the 22 medium jumbo style frets with your regular side marker inlays. Gotta say, I'm really happy with the color of this board. It's not every day a guitar gets sent to me with already pre-polished frets and it's all conditioned and everything, so that was a nice surprise. But now let's talk about our specs. So they do have reduced nut widths, 1.62 inches and 2.01 by the 12th. Then we have a first fret neck depth of 0.83 and by the 12th 0.93. However, despite the width, it's still a full-scale guitar, 24 3/4 inches. Here's the neck at the first fret and the 12th fret, just a slim C. Now we need to talk about the headstock. So there's a little bit of controversy behind this model as to whether it's a Gibson Vixen or a Gibson Les Paul Vixen. Most of them do not have the decal. However, that is not all of them. For example, the pink one I reviewed, as well as the blue one I currently have in my collection, have the Les Paul model silkscreen. Now, if you look at the serial number of the black one and my blue one, its serial number is only 1 week beforehand. I'm not exactly sure when the switch happened, but it appears only the earliest Vixens actually had that decal. Or it could be run variations. There hasn't been a lot of research into this. Personally, I kind of like the bare headstock look, but at the same time, knowing that the ones having it is slightly rarer makes my collector senses tingle. Here's a look at our Vixen truss rod cover. I like the way that they stylized it, and the rest of it's just regular. Moving on to the back now, we do have reduced control cavities, kind of like an Explorer, but slightly shortened, but it's still hand-wired Gibson branded pots. We've got our regular toggle switch cavity route here. There were a few small areas back here I ended up touching up too. In this glossed over area, there were a few dings, so we got those. But someone definitely enjoyed playing this thing. You can tell by all the buffed up areas, particularly like the entire neck and just right up there on the soloing spot. And the back just has some light blemishes. Some of it looks like it could have been factory paint errors. You see those small spots that stand proud. But it's looking pretty good now. It looks like we got maybe a small stand mark or something right there. Seeing as how fragile these finishes are, thankfully none of it was actually worn off the neck. But here's a good A-B comparison to buffed naturally by playing and how it started life, complete satin. Serial number dates this one to the 60th day of 2006, and we've got regular Grover tuners. The Goddess had those weird top-locking ones. Now we'll do a blacklight test just for fun. Kind of helps you show the wood grain, but you can also see the areas I touched up a little bit more clearly too. Oh, that's a really cool idea. A glow-in-the-dark paint for the grain fill of a guitar. So if you ever play on the stage with a black light, it would start to show, whereas it would just look like a regular dog hair finish in the beginning. That's a cool idea. But our headstock has that familiar greenish glow. And then the backside, you can see some more glow on the neck due to sweat absorption and whatnot. And then the back. All said and done, it's a comfortable 7 pounds, 2.5 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how she sounds. I'm really liking that neck pick, but it's kind of got a jazzy tone to it. But the bridge is rather dark sounding. So the middle, you get a combination of both of that. Now that we know all about the Gibson Vixen, what are my final thoughts? Is this a sleeper model that everybody needs to rush out and find one of their own before they become ridiculously expensive? Not in my opinion. I mean, it's definitely a very simplified Les Paul-like design. I honestly didn't enjoy playing this plugged in. The tones weren't exactly what I was going for today. I much preferred the Les Paul Standard that I had recorded just slightly before this. But to be fair, you know, Les Paul Standard is like $3,000. This was a lot cheaper than that. But you want to know what's strange? This is a very comfortable guitar just to sit around and noodle on. It might not be the best Les Paul ever, and I'm not necessarily the target demographic. If you're a smaller person, this might fit you better. It's kind of like how some guys like 335s because they're really tall and it just looks like a guitar on them rather than a toy. So if you've always felt a Les Paul looks a little bit obnoxiously big on you, that's when a Goddess or Vixen might come in handy. And if you don't care about the kind of girly name to them, you can always swap the truss rod cover off. These aren't just for girls. But if nothing else, I hope you learned something today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.